Welcome to the Business of College Consulting podcast. I'm your host, Brooke Daly, founder and CEO of Advantage College Planning and Advantage College Planning Franchising. Building a business is not for the faint of heart. In the Business of College Consulting podcast, you'll hear stories from successful college consultants on how they grew their business and the challenge and successes they had along the way. Grab your notebook and pen and get ready to be inspired. All right. Today I have the pleasure of welcoming Lisa and Bob Carlton to the Business of College Consulting podcast. Lisa is the founder of College MatchPoint, and in 2016, her husband Bob joined the business and probably made the second best decision of his life, right? The first was marrying Lisa. So welcome to you both.
Well, thank you. We're looking forward to this.
Awesome. Well, first, I just have to say that I adore both of you, and I have so much respect, not only for the business that you have built, but also for the impact that you've had on our community, on the IEC community. I personally have learned so much from both of you, and I know that my team has, that my colleagues and friends in the community have. So I just want to let you know that your impact is far and wide.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Let's jump in, Lisa. And can you tell me about the creation of College MatchPoint? And I'm curious about, what gave you the inspiration? Did you ever think that you'd be an entrepreneur or business owner? And just talk a little bit about how the startup came to be.
I definitely never thought I'd be an entrepreneur, for sure. I had worked in nonprofit my entire life, so I'd never asked anybody for money, number one. And I had heard about educational consulting, and my boss, when I lived in California, said, you'd be great at that job. So I actually explored it for probably 3 or 4. I once enrolled for SDI, and then for some reason I couldn't go. So it was in my mind for a few years. I've always been that girl who loved to make the class choices for people. I have a master's in counseling, so always in helping professions. But I think I loved the idea of getting to do something on my own. And originally I started the company with the idea of being an educational consultant for students who had learning differences or mental health challenges, which was the background that I'd had to date. So that's kind of how I decided to start it.
Yeah. So how did you prepare yourself, I guess, to own a business? What was the biggest hurdle as you thought about starting a business?
Well, in retrospect, it was kind of odd because we had just moved to Austin where we really had no network.
Yes.
So that was a pretty big, if I had started it back when we were in California where we had raised our kids, it would have been a lot easier. So I think the biggest hurdle for me was creating enough network to be able to have clients, right? So that was probably the hardest part.
Yes.
I didn't have those networks to pull off of that I would have had.
Exactly. This is so interesting because I think, we've had 5 episodes of the podcast so far, and I feel like a majority started their business in a brand new market, which is so interesting to me. How did that come to be? Anyway, so talk to me about how you did kind of penetrate the market. How did you put your name out there? How did you market yourself?
Oh gosh, let's see. In the beginning, I did, I was doing the UCLA program. And so I did my practicum at a very small private school that had a lot of kids with learning differences. And so a lot of the parents there, started saying, oh, I remember I was standing with the principal of the school one day and a mom comes up and says, oh, my son is really enjoying getting to know you. Would you be willing to work with him privately? And I kind of hesitate. And so the principal says she would. And then she goes, oh, wonderful. Now, how much will that cost? And again, I hesitate. And Adam finally goes, you're going to have to answer that one. And I was like, oh, okay.
Right.
So that was but it was a very small school. At the same time, I had a contract job where I was working with independent schools on a program called All Kinds of Minds, which is how to make the classroom more friendly to kids with learning differences. So I had made some contacts in there, and it was that school And one therapist was enough to kind of get me going. Those two people I formed pretty deep relationships with them.
Yes.
I always say the introvert's way to network is sometimes a couple of deep relationships versus, 1,000 relationships. So yeah.
Amen to that, Lisa. I love that. And clearly you were doing great work for them to be so passionate about, working with you individually like that.
Oh, I hope. Yeah. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I would say I enjoyed it right off the bat. And I did the UCLA program. I didn't do any, I didn't do the ICA, STI or any of that.
Mhm.
And didn't really have much of a network in the beginning, but I did have kind of this little network that I had created in Austin of these therapists in the school. So yeah, it worked out pretty well. Yeah.
That's awesome. Did you have any other marketing strategies? I mean, did you like the traditional, did you do any presentations or paid advertising in a newspaper? Guessing.
Oh my gosh, one of my biggest fails. So were they brochures? I don't remember. Okay, so I got these brochures made. I was so proud of them. And I did a very expensive mailing to like all these zip codes. And I guess I envisioned that like my phone was going to ring off the hook off that. And so it didn't. But then when finally the phone rang and the woman says, "Is this College MatchPoint?" And I'm like, "Yes," all eager and excited. And she goes, "Take me off your list."
Oh, Lisa. Oh, knife in the heart. Totally.
Yeah, I know. So I did that. Did presentations at the Griffin School, the school where I'd done the internship, and I did one at a church. I did a few. Yeah. I think probably less than most people did. The therapist that I connected with was an ADHD therapist who worked with teens. So he just started referring so many people to me.
Awesome.
Between those two, it kind of got the ball rolling. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. So can you paint the
what was the response to when you said to me, "I don't do any marketing"?
Oh yeah. So one day Bob and I are at dinner and I'm like bragging about, I'm like, "Can you believe how much this business is growing and I don't do any marketing?" And Bob looks at me and he goes, "Yes, you do. It's what's called over-servicing. You're over-servicing these initial clients so that there's no way they're not going to go out and talk about you." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I do that. Yeah."
Yeah, I do that.
So I think that might have been the marketing strategy.
Yeah. But Bob, I love that term. I don't think I've ever heard that term used in a marketing sense before, over-servicing, but
there's a great book. I grew up in publishing, so friends of mine know that I think that there's a book to read for almost every opportunity in the world. And there's a book called Raving Fans. Raving Fans.
Okay.
And it's about word of mouth, and it talks about marketing for word of mouth at different phases of a business. Over-servicing is not necessarily the best strategy for a multi-consultant practice that is trying to focus on operating income and margin.
Right.
It is a spectacular necessity for an early stage business, an individual consultant who is basically saying, "I need to activate word of mouth and referrals." And a mailing typically won't do that, or an app won't do that. But someone saying, "You have got to know Lisa Bain Carlton." I mean, changed my kid's life.
I mean, everybody should say that anyway.
Oh, stop.
Yes.
Well, starting with, in retrospect, now the business is not solely focused on kids with learning differences or mental health challenges, although we still do have that part of the business. I do think starting in that arena actually ended up being a huge plus, because many of those families walked in thinking, "My child can't go to college." Like the stakes were so high.
Right.
And I feel like that does activate, still does with our clients. Those clients are often the most grateful, right? Because the stakes are so high. So I feel like, which I certainly didn't know then, that sticking with that market in the beginning actually ended up being very, very helpful for sure.
Right.
I'm a startup guy. I worked with 8 startups before joining this one. And in those worlds, that strategy would be called the bowling pin strategy. And it goes like this. If you think you're addressing the entire market in Austin as a early stage business or a solopreneur, it's too big of a market.
Right.
You're going after, in Austin, there are about 8,000 parents of high school kids who might work with us. You can't market to all 8,000.
Right.
You could start with marketing to 80 parents of kids who have learning differences or mental health diagnosis, and really targeting that bowling pin in hopes that you succeed and it knocks over only other bowling pins. They tell their neighbors or friends, Lisa Van Carlton changed my kid's life. You've got to work with them. But you can't do that by saying, I'm going to make 8,000 or 1,200 or even 800 parents super aware of me, because I don't care if you have the biggest marketing budget in the world. You just don't have enough money to do that.
Right. That makes perfect sense. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, Lisa, you started the business on your own. You were a solopreneur. That is not what the business looks like now. Can you paint a picture of what College MatchPoint looks like today?
So today, College MatchPoint is 9 consultants. In addition to Bob doing marketing as well as seeing kids, we have a, like a person who client success kind of person, and another person who does that sort of more in with students as well. And then we bring on, and during the application season, we'll bring on about 8 to 10 essay coaches. So much larger practice at this point.
Do you want to talk a little bit about, in between these 2 stages of the company, how you built out Team Lisa and then the essay coaching seasonal model? Because I think those are both really helpful for other solopreneurs to understand.
Yes. So what I was hoping is that, so you paint the picture of where you are now, and then can you connect the dots? Like, how did you get there? What were what were your milestones along the way that you felt were the biggest?
Well, I would say I had 2 clients early on that really were like Uber referrers. You know what I'm saying? Those people are standing in the corner for you and you're like, God bless you. You'll know what you just did for me. And so really I can draw so many things back to just 2 people. Do you know what I'm like? Which is so interesting. And so the business, once I got serious about it, a couple of years I was kind of dabbling, and then I was like, okay, I need to get serious here. Once I got serious, it really started growing pretty fast. And so I was like, oh, I can't do all this. And this is kind of funny, but I mean, I literally knew nothing about business. I go to Bob and I say, Bob, is it legal if I hire somebody to, and then, I'm taking this money and then I'm paying them, but they're not getting all the money? And he's like laughing at me, right? And he's like, yes, that's legal. I'm like, okay, cool. And so I was originally kind of the sun god model. In other words, put as many people around me to help me be the consultant for all these people. And that was probably 3 years, 3 or 4. And that was really great. I wish I had started that a little sooner. I think I stretched myself too hard. I tried to do everything. And just like everybody, I thought that no one could be as good as me or whatever, which is all not true. And then, so there hadn't been another consultant until Bob joined the practice. So Bob was consultant number 2.
Wow. Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. And so Bob, lucky Bob. And then, how long did we do that before we hired where someone wasn't actually, we still had all these people sort of around us helping us. When did we hire?
I think 2 years before Julie and Allison came on, and then
so probably it's been like 5 or 6 years ago. So that we started hiring people as consultants, and then it's just kind of grown from there.
Wow. So what were your biggest challenges in that growth time? Like, let's say in the initial 3 or 4 years when you said that you hired people to support you,
Right.
Any lessons learned in that process or anything you wish you would have done differently?
I wish I'd done it sooner. I think that I waited too long.
Mhm.
I wish I had gotten admin help sooner. I was really slow to get admin help, and that is not my strength. So I was, during that whole time, I was still doing all the invoices and all that. So
Right.
that I think was a pretty big mistake. And then, yeah, I mean, the challenges got to be like in the first couple of years, I think it worked great, absent not having the admin. And then I think it just everything had to go through me. Like every single thing had to go through me. And I think that went on, like that progressively got harder, right? And we did get to a point as I kept adding team members before I added them as consultants, where I started purposely taking the messaging off of me, like highlighting other people, using the word our team, and I think now when I look retrospectively, people come to us because they want a team. So whereas people might think that's a negative, I think that has actually been a big positive for us. Yes. And that was very intentional to try to take the focus off of me, to have it more like all of us. And so that helped a lot, I think, in those years. But I do think it was super challenging that I was the decision maker on almost everything.
Yes.
And
I appreciate that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure you can.
So tell me about now that now you have a large team and you work remotely, right? For the most part, your team does.
Yep.
Yeah. So tell me, like, what's the best part about having a team, managing a team, being part of a team?
What do you think? Well, I think it's having multiple different types of personalities and strengths to offer clients, because I'm a good consultant, but I only have one skill set, right? And I remember when Bob started as a consultant and we do the NPS every year, I'm thinking, oh, I'm definitely gonna be, like I'm expert. And then we come out just about the same, which we've noticed over the time that we continue to add consultants, which is great. And so I think it's really being able to offer the market more, right? Is great. I also feel like some of our best ideas have come from the team, right? And so it's just like having all the different bright heads that are like, oh, why do you do that? I mean, obviously when Bob joined, that was like exponentially true. But I think that and I just like I like the camaraderie of the team. I like the energy. Yeah, it's great. I think it's just it also takes a lot of pressure off if somebody, we've had so many, things on our team, different people have situations and things. I think it's easy to have someone fill in and take over. So yeah, you can make it over the hump, then there's a lot of freedom there, I think.
Do you want to talk briefly about one of the other visions you had in starting the company in terms of offering women a sustainable way to have great jobs?
Yeah, I think that was the other thing that I've loved, is that, as a mom trying to raise kids, and I was always piecing together part-time jobs and is that when I learned that it was legal to actually hire these people, then I was like, oh, this is really cool. If I could do this the way I wanted to do it. Like, you don't have to pretend like you don't have kids. And yes, your kid's going to get sick and all these things. If I could create a company based on my values as a woman, then that to me has been, and let people grow into great jobs. And it's one of the reasons that I chose to pay people salaries versus, is that I really wanted it to be a job, where like any other job. And so for me, I think sometimes that brings me as much joy as the client work does, actually. Yeah.
Lisa, you're speaking my language. I love it. I love it. It's so powerful.
Cool. It's great. Yeah.
I know. I love that. So I'm thinking about, and I'm just being very curious. So Bob, you joined the team in well, it was a team of one at that point, right, Lisa? So you
Well,
were
I mean,
the
there
only
was-
consultant.
I was the only consultant, and then we had a kind of a right-hand person who did everything, with students that I didn't do. And then we had a team of SA consultants.
Got it.
Yeah. And so,
So-
then Bob,
So Lisa, like, can I just ask, so you have your husband join you, and I assume that it took some time before Bob was taking on his own clients, but like, how did you not step in and be like, oh no, that's not the way you do, or Bob, you are messing this up. Like, how did it not ruin your relationship?
oh, it was hard for both. I mean, that was a two-way street, difficult, right?
Right.
And I definitely did step in, probably too much. I mean, yeah, I think we had to find our cadence, wouldn't you say?
Well, let me do a PSA for therapy.
Of course.
In our profession, we believe that it's smart to ask experts and to pay them to give you advice. And so I think for us, this will be our 40th anniversary.
Oh, happy anniversary.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
So many celebrations. But I think for us, we have friends of ours who say, I can't imagine working with my own spouse. And my answer is typically, yes, you cannot imagine. Imagine how rich it is. You cannot imagine how vulnerable it is.
Yeah.
And you cannot imagine how much it occasions the opportunity to create a new marriage.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
true. So true.
Yeah. And I mean, it wasn't easy, but it also has been great. I mean,
Yes, absolutely. As someone who works very closely with my spouse in business, I can completely appreciate it, right? Like I'm in the trenches. I know what that's like. And I know that the challenges are real, but it also, I think, could possibly bring you closer together than ever. So
yeah,
I think, and it's fun to celebrate successes together and even have each other there for the not so successful times. And so, support is important. So, okay. So Bob came on the scene in 2016. How did College MatchPoint change?
Oh gosh. Well, I would say by the time Bob came on, we were beyond desperate for another consultant, say. So we were at a definite inflection point for sure. And I mean, Bob brought years and years of startup business experience, and especially, I can remember you saying to me early on, like, we should do content. We should, because he comes from a publishing background. And I remember thinking like, huh, why? And I mean, honestly, like that was the smartest strategy ever. So I feel like we would never have scaled to where we are now without the skill set that Bob's brought, both as a consultant and in marketing. So I think we were so I would have had to hire someone if Bob hadn't come, but they wouldn't have had the depth of skills that he has,
Right.
And I think, you always play down your consulting side, but you're a phenomenal consultant as well. And so
I can imagine.
Yeah. And so I think it just opened up a whole, now there's two of us, it just opened up a whole new range of possibilities for sure. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. And how did you grow from there? Did you add a consultant every season? Did you what was the growth strategy? Did you hire 5 people at a time?
Oh, we tried everything.
Can we answer all of the above?
Yes.
I was trying to totally remember. So I would say one thing that's a little unique about us is that we've done a lot of growing our own. So we've done a lot of where we hired someone as an essay coach or sort of a Jill of all trades, if you will, and then trained them. So I think our best hires, would you agree, have been kind of started in the company, not as a consultant, and we grew them into consultants. Would you agree?
I would agree. We have a team member who does that model, and she's spectacular.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think it's Two things. One, I'm the outlier of the company. I'm the one male. And so a company that believes in growing and developing women and seeing their inherent aptitudes and gifts and then forming jobs towards them, that is not particularly well suited for hiring someone off the market, because we don't know yet what their unique chemistry is. And we've been frankly lucky. It takes a lot of work to hire great people and develop them, but it's almost like that question of, do you over service as marketing? That is, do you over invest in people? And then I would say 18 months ago, we did do the take a deep breath, look at your finances, and hire 4 full-time people at the exact same time. And bet the company.
Yeah, we did.
bet the company on if those 4 work out, oh my God, we can reduce our caseload and be more profitable. If they don't, not only can we not reduce our caseload, we're not going to be profitable for a little while.
Right.
Because that will have literally cost us hard cash. And thankfully, it hasn't just worked, it has exceeded our expectations.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I would say that was one of the scarier things we did.
That's scary.
We had hired a consultant. We had hired along the way in between then, we had hired 2 folks that didn't work out, that weren't good matches for the company. I honestly think that might have been the best thing that ever happened to us, because it made us really examine what is a good College MatchPoint employee, right? Like, I think we were originally just like, oh, just finding anybody who could fill a seat, who's qualified, of course, and would be kids, but we didn't really dig into, wait, this company has, just like all companies, have distinct values that if they don't fit, and now I would say I would way more hire towards value. I could teach skill if they're capable. So, but hiring the 4 together was amazing. What are you laughing at?
It was amazing. I would say, just mathematically, it was 4 months of salary with limited billable hours against that salary. We've shared with colleagues our training program. It was ambitious is an understatement. It was an MBA and a master's in counseling in 4 months.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, and that I think was all, at the time, we were just trying to get them ready, right? But I think ultimately it also built a new culture, because you bring 4 people on. There were 4 of us at the time. You know, you just doubled the size of the company. I think it forced a new community too, which was really, really
right.
Yeah.
That's so true. When you're hiring 4 people, they're a cohort, right? So the support and the, you know, just the collegiality of that, there's benefit there for sure. That's amazing. 4 at one time. Wow.
Yeah. And then 3 are still here. 3 are very solidly still here. Yes.
Yay. Love it.
It wasn't a, you know, 100%, but we were never, when we did it, I think you said, what'd you say? If 2 of 4 stay, it will have been a success.
If 2 of 4 new hires at that level of experience stay, you beat the odds. You have basically said, I should declare success, spike the ball, and walk off, because that's far in excess of what you would expect at that level.
Right.
For someone who is a material contributor to your business.
Right. And who you're looking to represent your brand, right? Like I mean,
exactly.
And I think that's always scary. It's your hard work out there. So yeah, but that works really well.
Awesome. I love that success story. You inspire me.
Well, I mean, honestly though, but like I said, we had to fall down to force us to really look at what would be success for us. And my guess is that's a little different for every company, right? Because every company has its own little personality. And I think that's what you're known for in the market, right? Your brand.
Right,
so
exactly.
Making sure you can't teach that is what I think we've learned. Like you can't teach values if that person does not, and that doesn't mean the other person doesn't have great values. They just might not be the values of this company.
Right, exactly. It doesn't match.
Right. It doesn't match. It's not a fit.
Right, exactly. So you've talked a little bit about College MatchPoint and what makes you different. But what do you think about your team or your approach or your brand makes you unique?
Oh gosh. I think we are really focused. We really don't get into this. Do our students get into their number one college? All of that. We're really focused on helping our students be ready to thrive in college. And we're willing to walk away from clients that maybe what they're looking for is different from what we offer. And I think we have especially focused in on how to help kids get engaged. So I think if we have a theology, that's probably it, that engaged students are way more likely to be successful in college. And so I think we've put a lot, and that looks different for every type of student. But I think that's a spot we've really put a lot of focus on. What else would you add?
Well, I'm lucky. I get to talk to a lot of families before they decide to work with us. And oftentimes that's my most exciting part of the day. And we really lean into what makes us distinctive. And as a result, we probably say to about a quarter of the families, we're not a good fit for you. So we excel when a parent wants to be the parent in the process. Not the taskmaster, not the college expert. When that mom, and it is typically a mom, says, I love my kid, and I want to have a great last 2, 3, 4 years of high school. And then the second thing I would say, and this is a mantra, almost since the day that I joined the company and we train, and it's hard to communicate to people. We're in the business of delivering a feeling, an experience to a student and a parent. We get them into any college. They got themselves into North Carolina State or UT or Stanford. We are every bit as excited when they get into North Carolina State as we are when they get into UT or Stanford. Like families ask us on calls, what percentage of your students get into their first or second choice school? And our answer to them is, gosh, we've never cracked it and we never will.
Love that, Bob.
That's their success. Right. They're your kids. They're not ours. And so I think that really is philosophically something that we come back to more often than we do college knowledge.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say the other thing is, and I think Bob really brought this to the company. I never would have had this idea, and I probably would have been like, I don't know if I want to do that, is the amount of free resources that we give away and the amount of students that are using, especially our applied tech, UT and A&M I think is unique. And a lot of people are like, wait, why would you do that? And to me, that just has been such a great addition, because I do want to make more impact than just the money. You know what I'm like I want to make impact on the kids that we have, but I also want to feel like we're able to make a broader community impact. So, Bob can tell all the stats of, how many people are using those, but it's a lot. And, a high percentage of kids who apply. And to me, I never would have envisioned that. And yet it makes me so happy that we are able to do that.
That's so cool. So cool. And there's no better way of showing your value too, right? By creating something like that and showing, like, if you give that away for free, then what on earth do you do for those parents who hire you, right? I mean, but I love the fact that you bring it back to your community. That's one thing that our team is very focused on, is giving back to our community. And I feel like that's a great way to do it at on a large scale. And I had never really thought of that before. Like, your resources are so in depth and so specific and so helpful that you're right. You can impact a lot of students by offering that. So
How long do they stay on there, Bob? It's like,
Okay, so our pages, and full disclosure, I love everything that you can track numerically. Everything. A typical blog post for an educational consultant has someone scan it for 30 to 45 seconds. A little less than it takes an admissions officer to scan a student's. Our pages for our key schools, students stay on those pages 10, 15 minutes.
Wow.
Last year, 20% of the students who applied to either one of our top schools used our free resources, and I can guarantee you none of them were clients.
Wow.
And Lisa mentioned NPS, Net Promoter Survey.
Yeah.
Many IECs do some kind of customer satisfaction survey or ask. An odd observation, every year we get emails from students and parents who say, I talked to y'all when my kid was a freshman. I don't think you remember me. We didn't go with y'all. We used all your free stuff and they got into UT or Stanford or Cal. And can you tell people how great your stuff is? And our answer is, you just told people. We actually get referrals from non-clients.
Wow.
pretty often.
Who say, I know you didn't work with the Ramirez's as a client, but you helped their kid get into this school. And we are fortunate we have the resources. We want to pay to be your clients. And I say in conversations with parents at the beginning of the conversation before they consider working with us, let me just be clear to you, half of the families that we talk to like this don't end up being paying clients. I'm begging you to use our free resources. I am literally going to send you in the follow-up email 3 free resources and the link to our page for free resources, because that's the main way people work with us. And you said this, Brooke, but it's something that I think we're really clear at. Most IECs are committed to help kids.
Yeah.
Not just clients, but kids and parents.
Mm-hmm.
And we love doing it and have done it with kids at high schools and in community-based organizations. But we have this aha of we can do it by scale, by giving away everything we know, everything. And we really have a conversation where we say, this is too secret. Share this.
Well, I don't believe there is a secret. I mean, I believe that we have skill and expertise, but I
completely agree with that, because parents, I mean, let's face it, you can Google just about anything, right? Like parents can get the answers to the questions. That's not why they hire us, right?
Bob will always say they hire us for wisdom. They hire us for wisdom.
Well, particularly in an age, and this may be dated when somebody watches this 2 or 3 years from now, in an age where artificial intelligence is sort of either the excitement or the fear, people don't pay us for intelligence and they don't want things that are artificial. They pay us for wisdom and empathy.
Yes.
They pay us to care about their kids. And I remember early on, a team member was hired and they yelled.
Oh yeah, they yelled across the room. A kid didn't show up and they yelled across the room, am I going to get paid even though, and sort of my right-hand person at the time, she goes, wait, I think we just figured out our value. You got to actually care about the kid. Like you got to care, this was years ago, but it was one of those moments that was kind of crystallizing, like, yeah. They do up there.
Yeah. It's an important part.
It is.
So a lot of our listeners are newer college consultants just getting into business or just deciding to grow a business. What's one piece of advice, Lisa and or Bob, that you'd like to share with them in their business growth?
I'll share a piece of advice Bob gave me. Don't be afraid if you have it, to spend money to make money. I think that is so critical. And it was a great piece of advice Bob gave me early on, is like, should I buy this? Should I buy that? And it's like, don't be afraid to spend money, because you have to spend some money to be able to make money. And so I think that a lot of times people think they're saving money, but they're saving it in the short run, but it's not ultimately helping long-term profit.
Yes. I remember a consultant once telling me basically that they couldn't afford credit card processing. And I said, you can't afford to not have credit card processing, right? Like that just seemed, yeah. So very good advice, Bob.
And the piece of advice I would give, and it's a peculiar piece of advice, claim your role as an entrepreneur, claim your success as a woman who's beating the odds by starting and growing a successful small business. There is some mantra, and I don't truly understand it, of ICs when they gather saying, and I don't really like the business side, and I really don't think I'm a business person. The most successful and wise CEO at the 9 startups I've worked with, is Lisa Bain Carlton.
Oh, I love it.
This almost reflexive mantra of, well, I don't really know much about business. No, you should teach about business. You should teach about the way your instincts and gut level decisions help you grow your business. And when you make mistakes, how quickly you pivot, how quickly you change, how quickly you adapt. These people who come straight out of business school, they're typically men who have this vision that I know exactly how to do it. They fail, and they fail publicly, and they fail in ways that people make them heroes. IEC should claim their success as an entrepreneur, and particularly as a woman who's an entrepreneur, because that's building the next great businesses.
Oh. All right, can we just end it right there? Like, amazing. Thank you, Bob. And I feel like you are one of the biggest advocates for women in business in our industry. And you beat that drum, even as, if I can just say it, as a white male, like you are always like cheerleading.
Well, I mean, first
women,
off, my cohort has a lot of stuff to make up for it. We can oftentimes not be the most supportive, but I think it comes first and foremost by being awed by the business choices, the decisions, the expertise, and the facility for merging care, profound care for parents and students. An anecdote, if you will. When we first moved here, Lisa talked about that she didn't have a soccer field or a PTA. Be that mom who knew everything about college. I, on the other hand, was a marketing contractor for a startup, and we had offices that were pretty close to one another in our house. By that, I mean, I worked in one bedroom and she worked at the dining room table. And I had worked in education all my life. And I was on these marketing calls about direct mail and email programs and that kind of stuff. And then when I got off, I would overhear Lisa talking to a family and changing their lives. Kids having an option to go to college, and then parents saying, I never imagined my kid would go to college. And I joined the company purely based out of envy. That most of my life trying to affect change in education at the classroom or institution level, and to spend the balance of my life impacting at a student and a family level, and then to make a great business out of that.
Right.
Talk about beating the odds. That's incredible.
Yeah. So incredible. I love it. And I love that you're a husband and wife team. And I love just it. Yeah. You both inspire me.
But it's hard. It's hard to run a business, right? Like it is. It's genuinely, it's hard. It's you knock yourself down and then you get back up, that kind of thing. Yeah. It's easy, but it is incredibly rewarding.
Absolutely. So can I ask one last question? Okay, 2. One is, are there any, so Bob, you mentioned the book.
Fans.
Raving fans. Yes. Thank you. Are there any other books, Lisa, or resources that are your go-to for entrepreneurship or small business?
A couple, I would say I love the book Essentialism because I think that it's so important to like stay focused on what you're trying to do, you know, and like not getting 1,000 things going. So I love that book. I love the Biz Chicks podcast. I'm part of the Biz Chicks community in the Leadership Lab. I have found it very, very helpful to listen to women entrepreneurs who are not IECs also. I think it's important to have a balance. And I feel like I have learned so much from that. And then before, I mean, I know this is kind of cliche, but I did love the Brene Brown Dare to Lead podcast. Really loved that, and the book as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Me too. Thank you. Bob, were there any resources that you wanted to add?
Yeah, it's going to sound really bizarre. There is a poet who writes a lot about the intersection of poetry and business. His name is David White, and he has this fabulous poem called Start Close In. Start with the first step, the step that makes you most scared, the step that is most familiar to you. Don't start with the second step or the third step. I don't think that's verbatim, but I pretty much have it close summarized. And the reason I have found that so successful is I see that in our work with kids and parents, but I see that even more with fellow small business owners, where they're worried about the seventh step. When you start with a junior and they tell you, I'm worried about my letters of rec, and they don't even have a college list, your answer is start with the first step. And so I find that to be helpful. And then Lisa and I share this. I am a ginormous consumer of podcasts. And I love podcasts about other people's stories about building things. Because I think there's just so much to rip off there. It's a podcast, so you can rip off anything.
Of course. Love it. All right. And one last question. Were there any questions that you wish I would have asked that I haven't yet?
Oh, gosh. Trying to think. Question that you should. I always ask students, is there a question I should have asked you that I didn't ask you? You asked about failures. I can't think of one. Can you?
I have one. You asked about resources, books, podcasts. What colleagues have been resources to you? Because this is such a generous profession. I come from educational technology. It is categorically the least generous profession, maybe other than investment banking. Okay. People don't share with one another. And so I think a question that I would find valuable is what colleagues have been the generous resources that have helped fuel the success of the business?
I love that. Lisa, will you answer it?
Okay, so I think it definitely evolved. When I first started, I had a colleague who's no longer a consultant that I got together with for coffee every week. That was super helpful. We built lists together and things. Then Deb Davis Groves and I became really good friends and literally like talk to each other like most mornings. That has been. Well, now it's just a delight in my life. I mean, I don't even think it has that much to do with work.
Right.
But in the beginning, it had a lot to do with work. And I'm also part of a group of consultants that get together every week. I'm not as regular as some of the rest of the group, but I do really highly value that group. And then it's just fun people you meet along the way. Like Betsy Morgan and I were sitting at a conference once and we started sharing technology and it become really, now we're really, like our practices are friends. So we do some joint meetings and things and so I'm real. And then, like I said, now at the phase I'm at now, where it's really like, we're scaling a business, in a little bit different way. I'm finding it so helpful. The program I'm in is for women of other service-based businesses. So we have a lot of the same problems and that has been super helpful to me. But I really value the community of IECs. And, you know, and I love the fact that, you know, like, just like every conference or whatever, I feel like I get to know people I didn't, and like maybe I knew them, but I didn't know them. And it's such a generative community that I'm, and I think also giving back to the community is really
both of you do that really well. Bob, is there any colleagues in particular that you wanted to mention?
Well, it's never good to compliment the host of a podcast, but there's a person, Brooke Daly.
Sounds familiar.
I would also say that Brooke Daly has somehow managed to aggregate as guests on her podcast the greatest hits of people to rip off ideas from. I would say 3 other cohorts real quickly. One is during the pandemic, I found the IECA community to be such a resource. I would have never expected that people who before the pandemic thought Zoom was evil and hated online learning would immediately dive into basically being Jeff Slingo and Rick Clark's favorite Zoom guests. It was unbelievable. 2, I find some of the folks at College Wise to be incredibly generous with their expertise. Allison Lepore on a business side, we should pay her to be a consultant. Rune as a person who we really admire. And then this sounds peculiar. The cadre of consultants under the age of 35, the cadre of consultants who don't look like the consultants who built the current industry, either by lived experience or by background. I find them to be people who were so generous and who oftentimes I feel greater resonance with from a business standpoint.
Point well taken, Bob. Love that. Well, thank you both so much for being on today. It was such a pleasure.
You're just the best.
Oh. Thank you, Lisa. No, likewise. It's such a pleasure and an honor to have you both on. So thanks for sharing.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Brooke.
Have a great day. Thanks.
Thanks.